All right, guys. How to make a comeback in 20 minutes. How to make a comeback in 20 minutes. I am referring to 20 minutes of exercise. But guys, it's a lot deeper than that. So, when you start exercising, you can create a positive loop of winning, and I call that the merry-go-round effect. And if you understand this merry-go-round effect, then you can leverage it to make giant leaps. You'll be able to improve in your life in many different areas. All right. Once you get that positive loop going, and that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about. I'm going to talk to you about two frameworks that help us to understand why fitness connects to self development so well and how it works. I'm going to tell you stories about how fitness has changed my life, it has changed other people's lives, and I'm just going to riff on this idea, guys, because this is what I do. Kind of, I think by talking. So I hope that you guys are up for the ride because we're going to go over a lot of different stuff. I've been thinking about philosophy, about religion, about the meaning of life for a long time. And so I try to integrate those things into my life. And I really want to share this with you guys. So I'm just making lives and just talking about these frameworks as much as I can because I want to figure out how to distill it down and to say it in a way that resonates with you. So if it resonates with you, let me know, guys. And here we go. So you want to understand the merry-go-round effect and how it ties to fitness. If you want to do that, you have to understand the creation framework. This is a framework that I've been working on for many years, been reading lots of books. I've been testing it out, self-experimenting on myself to see if this makes sense and to discover it. So you have to understand the creation framework if you're going to understand the merry-go-round effect. And there is a dump truck there. And I'm going to go through both of those today. So let me tell you guys a couple stories about the merry-go-round effect. So, first of all, back when I don't know, it was at least 10 years ago. It could have been more, probably more like 13, 14 years ago. I remember standing in the kitchen, and I don't cry very often, but I remember standing in the kitchen with my mom, and I did cry. And I cried because my dad had sort of disappeared. He wasn't gone physically, but he was checked out and he was having some sort of a crisis. And I'm not going to get into the details, but I'll just tell you this. When I remember another moment, basically I told my mom, just to finish that, I told my mom that my dad needs to come back because it's his responsibility to be a dad and a husband. And she was like, "Yeah, I know." And she was crying and she said, "But I don't know what to do." And just to illustrate it even more, I'll tell you this story about another instance that was probably in the same month of time that I was sitting at the kitchen table with my dad, and I remember he's a smart dude. He knows a lot of stuff. And I asked him a question. And when I asked him the question, I knew that it was something he knew the details intimately about. And so I asked him this question. And when I asked him, I don't remember what I asked him. I just remember that I was devastated because when I asked him, he just went, "I don't know." And that was it. And so he was gone. Like, he was emotionally checked out. He was mentally checked out. He was at some sort of rock bottom in my view, and he might not want me to tell you about this, but uh, whatever. So, um, when that happened, I knew. I was like, dude, I thought to myself, man, I have to figure out a way to get my dad back, to get him out of this rut, to get him out of this hole that he's in. And so the next day, I got up at 5 a.m. and I knocked on the door and of his bedroom, and I was like, "Hey," and he's laying in bed and he's barely responds, and I say, "Dad, it's time to work out," and he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, we're gonna work out." And we flipped tires and we carried buckets and we did all sorts of like CrossFit stuff. And I remember the first day we got done with whatever the workout was, and I said, "How do you feel, Dad?" And he said, "Tired." Well, fast forward to like, I don't know, 2 weeks later, I remember him getting up out of bed and knocking on my door at 5 a.m. And I was too tired to get up. And he was like, "Hey, it's time to work out." And that was how it turned the tables for him. And so this fitness did something for him. And it, just as a little bit more context, at this time in his life, he didn't want to go to work. And that was one of the things, was he was struggling to even just go to work. And so um, every day he would just go to work because I got him to work out, and he had enough mental clarity to just get in the car and drive to work and do whatever he did there. So, fast forward in that story, he came to actually start a business and change careers, and he got out of that terrible hole that he was in. And how did something as simple as getting up in the morning and doing some workouts fix that? And this is basically what happened to me as well. And I'll tell you one quick story that happened to me. So when I was probably 5, 6 years ago, I was in my business and I was tired of my business. I was burnt out and I didn't know how to move forward. And so I decided to just um I decided to just do some workout because I hadn't been doing workouts at that time. And I didn't, this is important because I took for granted workouts. And that's part of this story, is that I took for granted the workout and I didn't do it for a long time. And I started waning in all of the different areas of my life. And that's what I'm going to tell you about, the merry-go-round effect. And so I couldn't get myself to do a real workout. So I just decided I'm going to set a very simple goal of I'm going to do 60 push-ups in work up to 60 push-ups in about 3 months. And so I started out like barely doing like 10, and then doing a few sets of 10, and then doing a few sets of 20, and then doing 5 sets of 20, and then doing 5 sets of 30, and so on and so forth, until at some point I got to this point where I could actually do 60 push-ups. And it actually only took me like a month and a half to get to 60 push-ups of non-stop, right? And but that wasn't the important thing. The important thing wasn't, oh, you did 60 push-ups. The important thing was that I started to eat better. I started to become proactive in my business. I started to do all these things, but it all started from just doing some push-ups, right? It was a small routine. And so let me talk to you about the merry-go-round effect. So the merry-go-round effect, uh, in order to understand the merry-go-round effect, you have to understand the creation framework that I've talked about, that I have talked about before, but I haven't talked about it today. So I'm going to talk about it for a moment. And so you have to go all the way down to the bottom, to the first principles of the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? And if you really think about this from a very simple from a very first principles type of way, then you get to the meaning of life is to create. And the reason you know this uh, is because you know that we're wired to try to survive. All of our instincts have to do with survival, right? Everything about community, everything about family, everything revolves around survival. And so I'm just going to read something to you guys that are some of my thoughts. So we'll put it this way. Creation is morality. Morality is to create. If there's one thing no one can deny, it is that the life we have is a result of the fundamental force of the universe, and that fundamental force is creative. This is not the reason for existence, it is the description of existence. It is creation. So it's not the reason, it's the description of existence. There is no life without the nature of life. They are both the same thing. When we say human nature, we are referring to all the raw instincts of the human. What are all the raw instincts of the human? All the instincts revolve around survival, around life. So let me illustrate it this way. When do you feel peace? When do you feel peace? You feel peace after you've created a wall of protection. Why are you so overjoyed by kids? When I have my kids in the store, people, especially women, come up and they're so happy to see those babies, and it's a just an amazing experience for them, right? Why are they so overjoyed by kids and babies? Because a person was just brought to life. Why do we love the outdoors? Because it's alive, it's nature, it's creation. Why do we want a garden? To create food. What is success? It's an abundance creation. Why do we want success and resent failure? Because being successful means being creative, and that's the meaning of life. It doesn't matter really if what you've created is quirky or colorful or success or revolutionary. After all, there is nothing new under the sun. At the same time, everything under the sun is new because it's just been created. But we define success as having created something big rather than something small. A big company, a big property, a big number of books printed and sold, a big following, a big change. We never celebrate someone having done nothing. As a result, nothing happened. That's absurd. If someone does something and nothing happens, then we wouldn't even notice. Humans can't even notice nothing. It's obvious, right? At our very core, our eyes only go towards that which is there. We don't look over at a house that is not yet built. We see the house and think of the house only after it is built or in construction. Even when our strategy is to not take action, if we were to evaluate that in action and say, yes, that was the correct decision, it would be because we were trying to create something. What? Create peace. Because if we created the perception, if we created peace, then we're creating the perception of confidence, of being unwavering. So when when we have a time of peace, we say strength is peace, right? Because if you have a strong army, then nothing happens, right? No one attacks you, and then you have peace, and that's inaction, right? That creation of peace allows for people to create life, right? To flourish, right? And so when nothing catastrophic is happening, then that creates the conditions for creation. And so let's answer another question before we move on. When you're confused about what to do in your life, about how to make a comeback, what can you always count on as the right answer? When you're confused, have you ever asked yourself this question? Have you ever said to yourself, I want to know what to do when I don't know what to do, right? And the answer is always create. Create rather than destroy. And our society is giving us these options of destruction all the time in politics, in entertainment, and I don't even want to go into all the details, but the P word and all of these, having fun with multiple partners, swinging, all these things are about pleasure that leads to destruction, right? And so when you're confused about what to do, you always know that you should always know that you should create. Okay? And that is the basic idea of the framework, the creation framework. So once you understand the creation framework and you embrace the creation framework, then you will always see the two options, create or destroy. And maybe you don't know what to create, but you know that you need to create something. And so now let's get into those areas. And this is where fitness comes in. So if you want to create something, then you have a few options. You can either create physical strength through exercise, and you can create a better body through nutrition. You can create a solution, which would be sort of in business and creative projects. You can create human connection, sorry. You can create a tribe, right? Creating a tribe is kind of like sort of in the same umbrella as human connection. So once you understand that creation framework, then now you can get into the circle theory, the merry-go-round effect, right? Because that is how fitness ties into self-development. So the merry-go-round effect goes like this. You have different areas of your life, and if you're trying to build a meaningful life, then you need to have it be stable and sound and strong in these areas. You need to be emotionally strong. You need to be spiritually sound or strong. You need to have a strong body. You need to have finances to support yourself. You need to have nutrition, and you need to have a healthy eating habits, and healthy is relative, obviously, and you need to have family. Everybody who is looking for a meaningful life wants to achieve these things. Even the people who don't have a family, they're probably lying about this. So you want emotional, spiritual, fitness, finance, nutrition, family, and community. And so, what is the merry-go-round effect? The merry-go-round effect goes like this. How does a merry-go-round work? If you go up to a merry-go-round and you jump on it and you push off with your foot, then since it's a circle, you imagine the bars and they're kind of dividing it up into a pie shape with its pieces, and you push off at any point on the merry-go-round and you start to spin. right? And you're in this specific section of the circle and you start to spin, but the rest of it starts to spin as well. That's obvious, right? Because it's a circle, it all spins. But as you push it, then it starts to push you, right? And every single point on that merry-go-round moves, and every single point starts to push the other point around. And so if you think of it this way, you've got on one part of the merry-go-round, you've got emotional, then you've got spiritual, then fitness, then financial, then nutrition, then family and community. If you have fitness, then on one point, and you step onto it, onto the merry-go-round, and you push off with fitness, then you will start to move all of the areas of your life. And so let me give you practical examples as to the fitness and how it applies to the all of the areas of your life. So of the merry-go-round effect. So you have when you start doing working out, then this ties into the creation framework because you're creating strength, you're creating muscle, you're adding protein and amino acids that build muscle in your body, right? And so you're sure and guaranteed to be doing something right if you're creating muscle. So that's one. Number two, when you do fitness, you're training your body to get through adversity. And so when something is mentally, so emotionally or spiritually uh, difficult, then the fitness trains your subconscious to be able to push through it, right? When you have then another sort of scientific idea that's not difficult to understand. Fitness, when you do it, when you do exercise, it puts more oxygen in your brain, right? And because you have more oxygen in your brain, you can think more clearly. And because you can think more clearly, then you have better emotional resilience. And when you can think more clearly and your brain is firing better, then you can understand spiritual concepts better, right? When you're working in your business and you have more oxygen to your brain because you've been doing fitness, then you have the ability to push through the difficult points in your life, in your business, right? When you do fitness, you are training your body that it wants to move and it wants to move better. So you're pushing your body to do that. And so then when you go to eat food, then you're bound to choose food that pushes you in that direction, that allows you to drop excess weight and allows you to complete that goal that you're training your subconscious to complete by doing fitness every day, right? And so this is the merry-go-round effect. You jump on and you do fitness, and but the awesome thing is it's not just fitness. If you have emotional, then emotional will if you choose to work on your emotional strength instead of fitness, then you will actually start to want to do fitness, right? Because you'll start to move better in all of these other areas because now you're more emotionally sound and you can make better choices in your life, right? And when you're spiritually when you work on your spiritual life, then you create more purpose in your life, and then that purpose, with purpose comes energy, and with energy comes movement and creation. So if you have this, if you embrace this creation framework and you embrace the merry-go-round effect, then let's say if you're in a rut and you're trying to make a comeback you can just choose one and you'll start to skyrocket up. If you're plateaued at, maybe you're at a higher level, welcome in guys, you're at a higher level and you're plateaued, then you can choose to add a challenge that has one of the things on this merry-go-round, right? The emotional, the spiritual, the fitness, the financial, the nutrition, and the family and the community. So if you do those things, then that will, if you embrace that framework, then you can move up, level up, make a comeback in your life, in your business, in your family, so on and so forth. So you guys would like my video on the creation process. If you look at my long form videos that are not live, you can see me explaining these things in more detail. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and God bless. Peace.